Go on then. Walk out, my husband challenged me, a smirk playing on his lips. Julian was convinced I wouldn't make it a single week without him, without his fortune, his network, his entire world that he let me live in. So I just slid my keys onto the marble countertop of the penthouse he owned. The very next day, his business partner and his father were in a total panic, calling me over and over. And now, the bank won't stop ringing. What on earth did you talk her into? You couldn't survive a week without me, Eliza. Julian placed his crystal glass down, the amber Lagavulin inside glittering under the light of our massive chandelier. Without my money, my contacts, my protection, you'd be a nobody all over again. Just some other pretty girl clearing tables or answering a phone. He adjusted his Brioni tie, fully expecting me to start crying, to plead with him, to swear I'd never even think of leaving again. Instead, I reached into my Saint Laurent purse and took out my keys. The penthouse, the Porsche, the personal safe. I set them down in a neat row on the granite island, each one making a small, sharp click against the cold stone. "You're right," I said. "Let's see what happens." All the color washed out of his face as I turned and walked to the door, leaving behind every single thing he had ever purchased for me. But that was a few hours ago. Right now, I was sitting in the lobby of the Four Seasons, reviewing the security feed from our penthouse on my phone. Oh yes, I had full access to the security system. Just another little detail Julian never imagined I was smart enough to figure out. He was pacing back and forth in our kitchen, picking up the keys, putting them down, then dialing someone on his phone. Probably Leo, or maybe his father, but definitely not the police. What would he even report? My wife left her keys and just walked away. The concierge approached me with a polite, practiced smile. "Miss Monroe, your suite is prepared." My own last name, my maiden name, felt unfamiliar when I'd booked the room that morning, but it was mine. The one thing Julian couldn't purchase, couldn't sell, couldn't trade away. I had paid for it with my own funds. Over $250,000 I had quietly amassed from what Julian condescendingly called my adorable little trading habit. And he would get a laugh at dinner parties, telling everyone I dabbled in stocks the way other wives dabbled in Pilates. No one had a clue that I'd transformed his initial allowance of $20,000 into enough capital to be entirely self-sufficient. The suite was, of course, smaller than our penthouse, but it felt infinitely more expansive with possibility. I placed my one suitcase on the luggage rack, the one I'd been hiding at my private gym for months, gradually filling it with my actual essentials on every visit. Julian always tracked our credit cards, but he never once thought to question my gym trips. A trophy wife, after all, has to keep up her market value. My phone vibrated. 19 missed calls. I swiped and deleted his contact, watching his name vanish, replaced by a simple string of digits. The first voicemail started playing by mistake as I tried to silence the phone. "Eliza, this is absurd." "Come back home. We can discuss whatever has you so worked up." His voice had that detached, controlled tone he used when discussing a volatile stock, not when speaking to his wife. By the fifth message, that control was starting to fray. You can't just walk out. Half of this stuff is in both our names. You need my signature for things too. I deleted them all without listening to the rest. This morning felt like a lifetime ago. I had woken up at 6 a.m., same as always, alone in our enormous bed because Julian had passed out in his study again, surrounded by glowing monitors tracking the Asian markets. The espresso machine was already pre-programmed. In spite of what he told his friends, I knew how to operate every single gadget in that high-tech kitchen. At a dinner party last month, he'd joked that I probably couldn't work a blender. Everyone had laughed, even me, the dutiful wife who understood her part. I had stood by our floor-to-ceiling windows, 35 floors up, just watching the city stir to life. The silk robe he had given me for my birthday felt scratchy against my skin. A designer label, of course, but the wrong size, picked out by his assistant who must have thought all wives were a size 0. Today was our 5th anniversary. He hadn't brought it up once all week, but I had given up on him remembering things like that after our 2nd year. The invitation for the charity gala was sitting on the counter. Another required appearance where I'd have to stand there and smile while the other wives talked about their summers in Monaco. Victoria Sterling would undoubtedly ask about my little habit with that sickeningly sweet, patronizing smile of hers. "Still playing with your stock market app, dear?" she'd ask. She had no idea I'd cleared more in the last quarter than her husband's entire legal practice. That's when I'd made the decision. I went to organize Julian's study, looking for our insurance policies. He was obsessive about his workspace. Everything had to be in its exact place. His digital voice recorder was on the corner of his desk, the little silver gadget he used to dictate important ideas. When I reached for a folder, I accidentally knocked it off. It hit the marble floor and, to my shock, it turned on and started playing. His voice filled the quiet room right in the middle of a conversation. She asked to see the investment statements again yesterday. Then a laugh, Leo's laugh. I told her they were far too complex, too many big numbers. And she actually bought it. Leo, I swear I could convince her to sign over a kidney and her only question would be which pen to use. My hands were shaking as I picked it up. I saw the date stamp. Last Tuesday. The day I'd surprised him at his office with his favorite ramen for lunch. He had acted so delighted, even introducing me to his new junior analyst as the lovely Mrs. Croft. Now I understood the smug look on that analyst's face. The recording continued. "That's the thing about this type," Julian went on. "Beautiful enough for the photo ops, dumb enough to manage, and grateful enough to never cause a problem. My father was right. Marry for beauty, rent for brains." I had carefully placed the recorder back exactly where it had been, angled just so. Then I located the insurance papers and I found something else, a folder labeled Prenuptial Addendums. It contained documents dated just last month, new clauses about forfeiture of assets due to abandonment, desertion without just cause, and they were already notarized with my signature. A forgery, but a damn good one. Standing there in his study, surrounded by all the symbols of his success and my supposed irrelevance, something in me didn't break. It hardened. He wasn't just dismissive. He wasn't just cruel. He was methodical. I was a line item on his balance sheet, and he was already strategizing my depreciation. My suite at the Four Seasons had a direct view of our building. I could see the lights of our penthouse blazing. Julian was probably frantically searching his office, trying to figure out what I had taken with me. He wouldn't find a thing. I had only photographed the documents, only uploaded files to cloud servers he didn't even know I had. The real damage would come later, all above board, through the 50% of everything he had put in my name to lower his tax burden. My phone rang again. This time it was Robert Croft, Julian's father, calling me personally. I ignored it, remembering how he'd introduced me at his last gala. Julian's wife. Pretty, isn't she? As if I were a new painting or a watch, just another acquisition to be judged. Then a text message came through from Eleanor, the secretary who had served drinks at every single Croft family function for as long as I could remember. "Heard you left. Suite 2105 when you want to talk. I have 40 years of information you might find useful." I smiled. The first genuine smile I'd felt in months. Julian said I couldn't last a week on my own, but he never once asked what I was doing during all those hours he left me by myself. He never wondered why his father's longtime secretary knew my maiden name. He never, for a single second, imagined his trophy might have been keeping a ledger of her own. 7 days. That was the challenge. I only needed that long to prove him wrong. After that, I would spend the rest of my life proving myself right. The keys I left behind weren't a sign of surrender. They were a declaration of war. And unlike Julian, I had already reviewed all the terms and conditions. 3 weeks had passed since that night at the Four Seasons. I'd fallen into a rhythm. Morning trades from my suite, afternoon strolls through Central Park, and evenings spent poring over the documents Eleanor had been supplying me with, piece by careful piece. Every file she sent over peeled back another rotten layer of the Croft Empire's corruption. But today felt different. Today was May 15th, our actual anniversary. And against my better judgment, I had agreed to one dinner. "Just to talk logistics," Julian had said on the phone, his voice meticulously neutral. "We have to be adults about this, Eliza." The salon on Madison Avenue was the same one I'd frequented throughout our marriage. Celeste, my stylist, ran her fingers through my hair with an expert's touch. "Special night?" she asked, completely unaware of the bitter irony. "Anniversary dinner," I replied, watching my reflection morph into the version of me Julian preferred. Polished, restrained, and looking very, very expensive. 5 years, isn't it? That's wonderful. Where is he taking you? Le Jardin, I said, his favorite, the place where the staff knew his wine order by heart and the chef always sent out extra courses to his table. I'd made the booking myself, knowing he would have forgotten. The confirmation was still on my phone, sitting right next to the 17 legal filings my new lawyer had drafted for tonight's real agenda. The dress I chose cost $9,000, more than what most people make in a month, and I charged it to the credit card he hadn't thought to cancel yet. A deep sapphire blue, his favorite color on me, though he hadn't complimented my appearance in at least a year. I looked at myself in the boutique's 3-way mirror. I was every inch the perfect wife he had cultivated, except for the tiny flash drive tucked away in my clutch, which held 40 gigabytes of incriminating evidence. My phone buzzed just as I was leaving the salon. A text from Julian. "Slight change. Leo and Sophie are joining. Need to go over the Singapore deal. Same time." Of course. Our anniversary was now a business meeting. I sat in the back of the taxi, watching the city lights streak past, and typed back one word: perfect. He wouldn't detect the sharp edge in it. He wouldn't notice it was the first time in 5 years I hadn't added a heart emoji or an "I love you" to a text. 20 minutes later, another message. "Actually, Father is insisting we all come out to the estate. He's having it catered. 8 p.m. The driver had already headed toward downtown. "Change of plans," I told him, giving him Robert's address in the Hamptons. The irony was thick enough to choke on. I was wearing a dress worth a small car to go eat catered food at the home of a man who'd never bothered to learn my last name before it became Croft. Robert's estate was a sprawling 20-acre monument to excess. The gravel driveway was already lined with familiar cars. Leo's Mercedes, the Porsches of 2 other partners, even Graham Chen's new Rivian. This wasn't a simple change of plans. This was an ambush. Patricia, Robert's 3rd wife, who was a few years younger than me, opened the door. Her smile had the same exhausted quality I'd been seeing in my own reflection lately. "Eliza, you look incredible," she said, but her eyes screamed something else entirely. "Why are you here?" The grand foyer opened into the main drawing room where Julian was holding court, a glass of scotch in hand, his third judging by the flush in his cheeks. He glanced up at me, his eyes quickly scanning the dress, the hair, the effort I'd made, and then turned right back to his conversation without a word of acknowledgement. Leo gave a little wave. Sophie was sitting by herself, sipping a martini with the focused air of someone counting the seconds until they could leave. "The lovely Eliza," Robert boomed, emerging from his study. He kissed my cheek, the smell of cigar smoke and bourbon clinging to him. "Though I hear you've been not so lovely recently. This whole separation business, it's bad for the company, you see." Eleanor appeared with a tray of champagne flutes. Her eyes met mine for a split second, but it was long enough. She knew exactly what this was. As she offered me a glass, her fingers brushed against mine. "Some anniversaries," she whispered, so quietly I almost missed it, "are about endings, not new beginnings." The dining room table was set for 12. I recognized almost everyone. business associates, their wives, and even Julian's personal lawyer, though I didn't realize it was him until later. They had staged this entire evening to corner me, to intimidate me back into my place. I took my assigned seat between Leo and Graham's wife, directly across from a towering portrait of Robert's father, the original Croft who had built this dynasty on illegal trades and strategic alliances. Dinner was served in a series of elaborate courses. Sometime between the lobster bisque and the sea bass, Julian began his little performance. "Funny story about how Eliza and I met," he announced to the table, even though no one had asked. The room obediently turned to him. She was at this big finance conference. Totally out of her depth. She'd wandered into a panel on derivative markets, thinking it was about art history. He paused, waiting for the laughter, which came right on cue. She asked me if a hedge fund was some kind of landscaping investment. Seriously, she thought we were talking about garden hedges. The story was a complete fabrication. I had been at that conference to present my postgraduate thesis on market manipulation tactics. But the truth didn't serve his narrative of the brilliant man rescuing the beautiful, simple-minded girl. "Thank goodness for stray puppies," Leo added, raising his glass in a toast. "They do make the most loyal pets." Under the table, Sophie's hand found mine. It was meant to be a comforting gesture, but her pity stung worse than their insults. I gave her hand a single squeeze back and then excused myself. "Powder room," I murmured, though we all knew the term was decades out of date. Robert's study door was ajar. His computer monitor was still glowing, left on in his hurry to play the gracious host. I slipped inside, my mind like a camera, recording everything. The layout of the desk, the wall safe hidden behind a bad copy of a Monet, the filing cabinet labeled personal. His password was on a sticky note right on the monitor. Robert III, 1946, his birth year, and his favorite historical figure. These men thought they were so clever. Through the window, I could see the dinner party. Everyone was laughing at something Julian was saying. He was on his feet now, gesturing dramatically with his wine glass, playing the part of the magnanimous husband to perfection, while his actual wife stood in the shadows, gathering intelligence. When I returned to my seat, the conversation had shifted to the Singapore expansion, leverage ratios, risk mitigation, the usual. The wives all sat in silence, like decorative statues, while the men tossed around millions of dollars like poker chips. Then Leo, drunk enough to be truly vicious, made his grand statement. "You know what Julian is? He's an empire builder, and our Eliza here," he said, gesturing at me, "she's the display case." Gorgeous, perfectly crafted, but ultimately just for show. The laughter that followed was sharper this time, like they all understood the joke was close to the bone. Julian raised his glass. "Best acquisition I ever made. Great tax write-off, low maintenance, and she appreciates in value at all the right parties." Eleanor was clearing the plates, her movement slow and deliberate. Our eyes locked across the table, and in her gaze, I saw it. 40 years of silent, simmering rage. 40 years of watching women like me be appraised, used, and then thrown away. Her tiny, almost imperceptible nod told me everything. She had heard it all, she had documented it all, and she was ready when I was. In that moment, something inside me didn't break. It crystallized, becoming as hard and as clear as the diamond on my finger, which suddenly felt like a handcuff I was finally ready to pick. The diamond on my finger threw tiny rainbows across the car's interior as I left Robert's estate that night, each one a flicker of the fire to come. Inside the car, I reached under the passenger seat and pulled out a cheap burner phone, bought with cash from a corner store where no one asked for ID. My fingers flew across the keypad, typing a simple message to the only number stored in it. Tuesday, 2 p.m. Golden Lantern, Chinatown. Eleanor's reply was almost immediate. "I'll bring the tea." The 3 days of waiting felt like an eternity. I kept to my suite at the Four Seasons, ordering room service, making a few small trades to keep my mind occupied. Julian had stopped calling. His lawyer was the one contacting me now, sending stiff, formal emails about reconciliation in the interest of financial and social stability. Each one was forwarded directly to Clara Vance, my new attorney, whose office was 2 hours away in a part of Connecticut where the Croft name meant nothing. Tuesday was gray and sticky. The Golden Lantern was a tiny restaurant wedged between a pawn shop and a store selling herbal remedies, its windows clouded with steam. No one from Julian's world would ever set foot in here. It was perfect. Eleanor was already at a table in the back corner wearing a simple floral dress. She looked like anyone's grandmother, but her eyes held the sharp, focused intensity of a lifelong archivist of sins. "Mrs. Croft," she started, and I gently cut her off. "Monroe. I'm using my name now, Eleanor." She gave a small, genuine smile and pushed an old biscuit tin across the table. It was the kind of tin that usually ends up holding sewing needles. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was what looked like a tube of lipstick. "Twist the base 3 times, then pull," she instructed. It wasn't lipstick. It was a flash drive, 16 gigabytes of what Eleanor called her retirement plan. "I started collecting this back in '88, she said, her voice low. "Robert's first wife, Elena." She knew the numbers weren't right. She asked me to listen, to keep notes, and then she had her accident. Eleanor's fingers made little air quotes around the word. "Single car crash, clear day, brake failure." After that, I saved everything. Every memo I could copy, every phone log I could access, every mistress who was paid off with corporate funds, every SEC filing that didn't quite match the internal books. The waiter brought our tea, and we sat in silence until he left. Eleanor poured with a steady hand, but I saw a slight tremor when she spoke of Elena. The second wife, Carolyn, she lasted a bit longer, a Wharton MBA, very smart. She started asking the right questions around year 4. Robert had her committed. Exhaustion, they called it. She signed away everything from a private psychiatric hospital to avoid being held there indefinitely. My tea grew cold as Eleanor detailed 2 decades of financial misconduct, each crime meticulously cross-referenced on that tiny drive. But she saved the most chilling part for last. "Your husband isn't just a part of it, Eliza. He's been courting Leo's wife, Sophie. There's a paper trail, jewelry charged to shell companies, hotel bookings that line up perfectly with his business trips. He's planning to leave you, but not before he completely discredits you. That dinner party, they were all there to act as witnesses to your unstable behavior. The walking out, leaving your keys, they'll frame it as a mental breakdown. The dumplings arrived, but neither of us had an appetite. I thought of Sophie's hand on mine and wondered if her sympathy was genuine or just part of the act. That night, I sat in my hotel room with my laptop, the contents of the flash drive open on my screen. It was an avalanche of corruption, 40 years of it, organized into folders by year, by crime, by victim. But it wasn't enough. I needed Julian's own files to tie it all together. Clara Vance picked up on the second ring, even though it was almost midnight. "I need to form a company," I told her. "Something discreet, something untraceable." "When?" "Tomorrow. That's a rush. It's going to be expensive. I'll pay whatever it takes." 2 hours north of the city, past the manicured lawns of the towns where Julian's partners lived in their gilded cages, Clara's office was on the second floor of a normal-looking building, shared with an accountant and an orthodontist. No modern art, no marble floors, just degrees on the wall and a coffee machine that had seen better days. She already had the paperwork. Aura Strategic Ventures, LLC. Incorporated in Delaware, registered in Connecticut. The business address is a P.O. box that routes to another LLC, which is owned by a trust. "It's a ghost," she explained, sliding the documents toward me. "The structure is perfectly legal, but it would take a team of forensic accountants months to unravel it. By then, you'll have done whatever it is you're planning. How do you know I'm planning something?" Clara leaned back in her chair, studying me. "Because women who pay triple for a ghost corporation aren't doing it for fun. They're doing it to survive." A week later, Julian left for a 5-day trip to Hong Kong. Expanding our Asian markets, he'd said. though Eleanor's intel told me he was really there to open accounts I could never reach. I gave our housekeeper, Maria, the week off with full pay. Just doing some deep cleaning, I explained. I need the place to myself. Alone in the penthouse, I became someone else entirely. Not the wife, not the ornament, but a forensic archaeologist, unearthing the evidence of my own planned demolition. Julian's office password was laughably sentimental, our wedding date, as if that day meant anything to him beyond a favorable tax event. His computer was a treasure trove, folders inside of folders, trades time-stamped to the minute, showing an undeniable pattern. Robert would have lunch with a CEO, and within hours, Julian would execute a massive trade in that CEO's company stock. The pattern was glaringly obvious once you knew where to look. In a locked desk drawer, the one he thought I couldn't pick, I found the emails. Not just about Sophie, but about me. Memos to Leo discussing my increasing fragility, suggestions that I might require professional help, plans to have me evaluated by a psychiatrist on Robert's payroll, the same one who had testified at Caroline's commitment hearing. My hands were rock steady as I photographed every page, every screen. Each file was uploaded to Aura Strategic Ventures' encrypted cloud. Every document was placed back exactly where I found it, aligned to the millimeter. Julian would come home to an office that looked completely untouched, while I held digital copies of everything that could bring him down. The final piece was in his personal safe. He'd hidden the combination inside a biography of Rockefeller, thinking himself so clever. Inside, past the stacks of cash and gold bars, was a single manila folder labeled Severance Plan. It wasn't about business, it was about me. A detailed timeline for when to file for divorce, how to allege abandonment, which assets to transfer first. My life was being liquidated, complete with profit and loss projections. I photographed it all. Then I sat in his expensive leather chair, looking out at the glittering city below. Somewhere out there, Eleanor was probably filing her own kind of report. Clara was setting up the next layer of corporate defenses, and Julian was sound asleep in his Hong Kong hotel suite, dreaming of the empire he built on the backs of women he thought were fools. He was wrong about one thing, though. I wasn't just another trophy in his collection. I was the one holding the hammer. The metaphorical hammer felt heavy in my hand. I stood up from Julian's chair, my reflection a faint outline against the dark screen of his computer. It was the face of a woman I hardly knew, someone colder and more focused than the girl who had walked down that aisle 5 years ago. The next morning, I was back at my routine at the Equinox on Columbus Circle. The swimming pool was my sanctuary, a place where the world melted away into the rhythm of laps and the scent of chlorine. I was hoisting myself out of the water when Sophie appeared. Her workout clothes were immaculate, but her face was strained, with dark circles that her concealer couldn't quite hide. "Leo knows," she said, her voice a low whisper. She glanced around the nearly empty pool area. About Julian's messages to me. He hired a private investigator. He had our phones cloned. Water dripped from my hair, pooling on the cool marble floor. "Why are you telling me this, Sophie? Because whatever you're planning, and don't insult my intelligence by pretending you're not, these men don't just get mad when they're backed into a corner. They get biblical." She pulled her sunglasses down just enough for me to see a faint, yellowish bruise along her jawline, expertly covered but still there. "Leo is already shifting assets to the Caymans. Robert has been making calls to every judge he plays golf with. They smell blood in the water." Before I could even process it, she was gone, her footsteps echoing across the wet tiles. I just sat there, the chlorine stinging my eyes, wondering if she had been sent as a warning or a test. With these people, it was always hard to tell the difference. That evening, Julian came home with an armful of calla lilies, my least favorite flower, a fact I'd mentioned only once, years ago. He'd brought me roses for every occasion since, whenever he remembered an occasion at all. The lilies were a message. He was paying attention now. "Thought we could have a quiet dinner," he said. placing them on the island where my keys had once been, like we used to. We hadn't had a meal together, just the two of us, in over a year. I watched him open a bottle of wine, the expensive Burgundy he usually reserved for clients, and arrange some cheese on a board with an uncharacteristic amount of care. His hands, usually so steady when signing nine-figure deals, had a slight tremor. "I've been thinking," he began, sitting across from me at our massive dining table, a table that could seat 12 but had never once hosted a simple family dinner. "We should go on a trip, just the two of us. Maybe that ranch in Wyoming with no phone signal? You always said you loved the mountains." I had said I loved mountains once, on our honeymoon, a trip he spent entirely on conference calls. The fact that he remembered it now felt like a trap. "When?" I asked, my voice flat. "Next week, or sooner. We could leave tomorrow." His eagerness was a dead giveaway. "You seem stressed, Eliza, this whole thing. Living in a hotel. It's not healthy for you." He slid a document across the polished wood. "New insurance policies," he explained. "Better coverage for both of us." His eyes followed my hand as I reached for the pen, watching for any sign of hesitation or suspicion. Under the table, my phone was silently taking pictures of every page, an app Clara had installed storing the images directly in Aura's secure cloud. "You do trust me, don't you?" His question hung in the air between us, heavy and menacing. Implicitly, I lied, signing my name with the very same hand that had just finished documenting his plot to destroy me. 3 days later, my mother arrived from Michigan, her visit announced by Julian himself, who had insisted on picking her up from the airport, something he had never done. He carried her bags, praised her new hairstyle, and asked about her garden with a feigned sincerity so polished it shone. "Oh, honey," she whispered, pulling me into the kitchen while Julian mixed her a perfect gin and tonic just the way she liked it. "You didn't tell me things were getting so much better." He seemed so attentive. The words I wanted to scream were trapped in my throat. "It's an act, Mom. It's a performance. You're the audience, and I'm just a prop." Instead, I managed a weak smile. He's full of surprises. That week was a masterclass in Julian's manipulation. He took us to Broadway shows he'd always called lowbrow, to restaurants with months-long waiting lists that I knew his assistant had bullied her way into that morning. He even arranged a surprise spa day for my mom and me while he took care of some business. My mother was completely captivated, her eyes welling up with tears when he toasted her at dinner, calling her the woman who raised this incredible person. I watched him play the role of the perfect son-in-law and realized with a chilling clarity that I had never actually seen him try before. This was the full force of his charm, the same charm that had built his fortune, now laser-focused on convincing my mother that her daughter was safe and sound. On the last night of her visit, she sat on the edge of my bed in the guest room. "Honey, you've lost weight. And your smile, it doesn't reach your eyes anymore." Her fingers traced my cheekbones, which were sharper now. "Are you happy?" From the corner of my eye, I could see Julian's shadow lingering in the hallway, listening. "I'm exactly where I need to be," I said, my voice loud enough for him to hear, but ambiguous enough to be true. After my mom left, Eleanor texted, a new meeting place, the main reading room at the New York Public Library where she volunteered twice a week teaching adults to read. The irony was almost too much. She was helping people decipher words while surrounded by the city's most powerful functional illiterates, men who never bothered to read the human cost of their actions. She laid out a series of newspaper clippings on the old oak table, like she was reading tarot cards. Elena Croft, 1994, drove her car off a bridge, clear skies, no skid marks. Caroline Croft, 2003, institutionalized for nervous exhaustion, divorced while under sedation, disappeared after she signed the papers. Jennifer Croft, 2015, accused of embezzling from a charity, filed for bankruptcy, last seen at a women's shelter in Chicago. Then Eleanor placed 4 photographs in a line: Elena, Caroline, Jennifer, and me, All of us blonde, all between 5'4" and 5'6", all with the same fine-boned features that looked good in society pages. Robert picks them, she said, her voice barely a whisper. It's like a casting call. Young, pretty, from good but not rich families who will be impressed by the money. Smart enough to be a good conversationalist, but not smart enough to be a threat. They marry them to Julian, use them for a few years, and then, around year 4, when they start asking too many questions, they get rid of them. Why year 4? It's long enough to establish a public pattern of instability, but it's short enough that no one in their social circle gets too attached. By year 5, you're either broken or you're gone. She touched my hand, her skin like paper, but her grip surprisingly strong. You're at 5 years and 3 months, Eliza. Whatever you're going to do, you need to do it now. Elena waited too long. Caroline was too confrontational. Jennifer trusted the wrong lawyer. I stared at the faces of the women who had come before me, their images blurring into one single urgent warning. What about you? I asked Eleanor. Why did you stay all these years? She was quiet for a long moment. I was the daughter of Robert's first secretary. When my mother died, he gave me her job. He called it an act of kindness. I was 19. I was grateful. I was stupid. By the time I realized what kind of records I was keeping, I was in too deep. It's a different kind of cage, but it's a cage all the same. But now, I'm 63, I'm invisible, and I'm very, very patient. The library's closing announcement echoed through the vast room. As we stood up to leave, Eleanor handed me one last photo. It was a young woman, blonde and beautiful, probably just out of college. Who's this? Chloe Bennett. Her father had lunch with Robert last week. She just graduated from Wharton. They'll probably announce the engagement in 6 months. Eleanor's eyes held the compressed fury of 4 decades. She's the next you, Eliza, unless we make sure it stops, now. The photo of Chloe Bennett felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket as I walked out of the library. 22 years old, her whole life ahead of her, and she was about to walk straight into the same elegantly disguised trap that had already claimed 3 women before me. I slipped the picture into my wallet right behind my old university ID, the one from before I was Mrs. Croft, back when I was just Eliza Monroe with my own future. The next morning, I made the first withdrawal, $10,000 from our joint checking account. It was enough to look like I was buying a new couch, but not enough to set off any of Julian's alerts. The bank teller didn't even raise an eyebrow. Mrs. Croft buying expensive things was business as usual. I converted the sum to cash at 4 different banks, then deposited it into the account for Aura Strategic Ventures. Clara had taught me how to structure the deposits to look like consulting fees for an interior design project. The government loves a paper trail, she'd said, even if it's a fictional one, as long as it's well-documented fiction. That evening, Julian got home at 10 instead of his usual 8. His tie was off, his jacket slung over a chair, and he already smelled of scotch. He'd clearly made a stop between his office and our penthouse. I was in the kitchen brewing some tea when he stumbled in. Lost the Morrison account, he announced, pouring himself at least 3 fingers of Lagavulin. $50 million in assets just gone. They cited compliance concerns. Can you believe that? My firm with compliance concerns. I kept my expression perfectly neutral, even though I knew Eleanor had sent an anonymous tip to Morrison's board 2 weeks ago. That's terrible, darling, I said, watching him down half the glass in a single gulp. Leo thinks someone is leaking information to our clients, he continued, pouring another. His hand was shaking slightly. He says there are whispers of an SEC probe. It's insane. The next day, I moved 15,000. The day after, 20. Spa treatments, I told the teller who finally asked. My husband wants me to relax. She gave me a knowing smile, probably thinking about her own husband who likely never noticed such things. Julian's drinking ramped up in direct proportion to his losses. Each night brought a new disaster. Another major client pulling their money, another partner demanding answers, another rumor of a federal investigation. He would stand in his study, shouting into his speakerphone while he paced and drank, signing any document I put in front of him without even glancing at it. Power of attorney adjustments, insurance beneficiary changes, amendments to our family trust. His signature grew more and more erratic with each passing day. Clara called me on Thursday morning from a burner phone. "Can you meet?" "Now. It's urgent." I met her at a service plaza on the highway. She was sitting in her practical Toyota, looking like any other suburban mom except for the taut line of her shoulders. "The feds reached out," she said, getting straight to it. "They know I'm your lawyer. They want to talk." My heart hammered in my chest. How? Robert Croft has been on their radar for over a year. A former analyst filed a whistleblower complaint. They've been building their case, but they need someone on the inside to confirm the details. She passed me a business card. "Agent Sarah Jenkins. She asked for you by name. Did you tell them anything? Attorney-client privilege holds. But Eliza, if you're going to make your move, it has to be now. As soon as the FBI makes their investigation public, they'll freeze every single asset. Anything you haven't secured by then will be tied up in court for years." That night, I watched Julian pour his 6th drink before he'd even thought about dinner. His phone was ringing off the hook. Leo, Robert, lawyers, crisis managers. Each call seemed to make him drink more, sign more, and suspect everyone except the one person quietly refilling his glass. "Maybe you should have something to eat," I suggested, playing the part of the concerned wife while mentally calculating how much more his liver could take. "Not hungry," he slurred, then looked at me with bloodshot eyes. "You've been different, quieter." "Therapy?" I lied, my voice smooth as silk. "I'm learning to accept the things I cannot change." Saturday was the day of the monthly ladies' auxiliary brunch at the country club. I had been dreading it, knowing Victoria Sterling would be there with her pack of sycophants who had made a sport of belittling me for 5 years. But Clara's news had changed something in me. I could feel a timer counting down, and I was done pretending. Victoria started in before I'd even had a sip of my mimosa. "Eliza, darling, still tinkering with your little stock market app. It's so sweet when wives have hobbies. It's like a child with a toy kitchen." The table erupted in polite, practiced chuckles. In the corner, Eleanor was pouring coffee, as invisible as the floral wallpaper. Our eyes met for a brief second. "Actually, Victoria," I said, my voice clear and carrying across the room, "my portfolio is up 380% year to date. How's yours?" A stunned silence fell over the table. Victoria's face shifted from smug to utterly bewildered. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I'm sorry, what did you say?" 380%, I repeated. "I can show you the statements if you like. I particularly enjoyed shorting your husband's tech company last month. Made an absolute killing when their flagship product was recalled. You did know about the recall, didn't you?" Victoria's face went chalk white. She hadn't known. Around the table, the other wives were leaning in, suddenly seeing me as more than just Julian's arm candy. "I suppose," I continued, stirring my coffee with deliberate calm, "that some of us prefer a real portfolio to a toy one." Eleanor actually cracked a smile. It was just a tiny flicker, a slight upturn of her lips as she refilled my cup. The rest of the brunch was held in an awkward, tense silence. By that evening, Julian would hear about it. By the next morning, Robert would know that his daughter-in-law had claws, and I didn't care. The clock was ticking, and I was so tired of being underestimated. The real explosion happened on a Wednesday. I was in my new, discreet apartment when my phone blew up with notifications. Sophie had filed for divorce from Leo, and she had come armed. It wasn't just about infidelity. It was about financial fraud, hidden offshore accounts, and a damning email exchange where Leo discussed managing Sophie with his legal team. Julian called me 17 times in a row. I finally answered on the 18th. "What did you say to her?" he barked. No preamble. "Say to who?" "Sophie. Leo thinks I leaked things to her. He says you two were talking at dinners, that you must have..." I didn't tell her anything, I said, and it was the truth. Sophie had found her own way, fought her own battle. We were soldiers in parallel trenches who had never even spoken. I could hear something smash in the background on his end of the line. "He's pulling out," Julian's voice was ragged, "out of the fund. 25 years of partnership, just gone. He says I betrayed him." His laugh was a broken, bitter sound. "I wasn't even serious about Sophie. She's too smart, too much work. It was just keeping my options open. The confession should have stung, but it didn't. I just felt cold." I made a mental note for Clara. More evidence. From the speakerphone, I could hear Leo screaming in the background. "You always had to be the smartest guy in the room, Julian. Well, congratulations. You just burned the whole building down." The line went dead. Julian didn't call back. But an hour later, a text from Eleanor arrived. "Robert just called an emergency partners meeting. The foundation is cracking." I stared at Eleanor's text. The words "the foundation is cracking" glowing on my screen. It felt like a prophecy being fulfilled. My hands moved with a purpose I didn't know I had. I pulled a dark brown wig from my closet, one I'd bought for cash weeks ago from a theatrical supply shop in a neighborhood Julian wouldn't even drive through. The dress was a cheap polyester thing from a department store, something Eliza Croft would have been horrified to be seen in. A pair of oversized, non-prescription glasses completed my transformation into a nobody, an anonymous woman in a city of millions. Leo's office building on Park Avenue had security that was more for show than for actual protection. I'd been there a dozen times as Julian's wife. I knew the guards took their lunch at 12:30 sharp, and I knew Leo's executive assistant, Sarah, always took a full hour for her sushi break. The elevator ride to the 52nd floor felt like it took a year. Tucked in my purse was a simple manila envelope. Inside were printed screenshots of every demeaning message Julian had ever sent about Leo. The mockery, the contempt, the detailed strategies for poaching his clients once the partnership inevitably ended. But the real venom was at the bottom. Julian's financial projections for acquiring Sophie after her divorce was final, complete with calculations on how to gain control of her family's inheritance through a new marriage. The door to Leo's office was imposing, solid oak with his name in gold leaf. I slid the envelope under it, hearing the soft whisper as it landed on his expensive rug. Then I walked back to the elevators without looking back, moving with purpose but not in a hurry. The security cameras would just see an unremarkable woman who could have been anyone. 3 hours later, Eleanor forwarded an internal email from Julian's assistant. Partnership dissolution notice received from Leo Vance. Effective immediately. Legal team requests urgent summit. The Warwick Hotel on 6th Avenue still took cash, provided you had enough of it. I checked in under Eliza Monroe, my real name now feeling like a suit of armor I was finally learning how to wear. The room was small but spotless, with a little desk where I set up my laptop and the burner phone Clara had provided. The SEC whistleblower hotline picked up after 12 rings. First, a series of automated prompts, as if reporting a multi-billion-dollar fraud was as simple as checking your bank balance. Finally, a real person. SEC Enforcement Division. "How can I help you?" "I need to report systematic long-term insider trading at Croft Capital," I said, my voice as steady as the city skyline outside my window. "I have over 5 years of documented proof, including timestamped trades that directly correspond with material, non-public information." The agent, a woman named Jennifer Liu, listened patiently as I laid out the entire scheme. Robert's lunches with corporate executives, followed by Julian's perfectly timed massive trades, the network of shell companies, the offshore accounts. The pattern was so blatant, a child could see it. She asked a few sharp technical questions that made it clear she knew exactly what I was talking about. "Why are you reporting this now, Ms. Monroe?" she asked. I looked out the window at the towering skyscrapers of Manhattan, all those monuments built by men like Robert and Julian. "Because I finally realized that my silence makes me an accomplice," I said. and because they're about to do to another young woman exactly what they did to me. After the call, I took Eleanor's 40 years of evidence, now copied onto 3 separate hard drives, and distributed them. One went into a safety deposit box at a Chase bank, another at a Bank of America, and the third into Clara's office safe. My instructions were clear. If anything happened to me, release everything simultaneously to the FBI, the SEC, and the Wall Street Journal. That evening, Robert's black sedan pulled into our building's private garage. I watched from the penthouse window as he stormed out, his face a mask of fury and fear. He didn't even bother with the doorman. He had his own key, the kind of privilege a father-in-law who owned a third of his son's company enjoyed. "Where are the books?" Robert's voice echoed through the apartment before he'd even reached the study. "Dad, what's going on?" "The books, Julian, now." I made myself busy in the kitchen, brewing coffee with a deliberate, maddening slowness while their voices escalated through the walls. My phone, propped against a vase in the hallway, was recording every single word. "Leo's out," Julian was saying, his voice strained. "But we can handle it. Leo's out, Morrison's out, Chin pulled all his assets this morning. The FBI was at Leo's office today, Julian. They were asking questions about our trading history. That's not possible. Everything we do was bulletproof until someone started talking." Robert's voice dropped to a dangerous growl. "You told me the wives were handled. You said Eliza was too stupid to understand what she was signing." "She is," Julian insisted, his voice cracking. "She doesn't even know how to balance a checkbook." I walked in at that moment carrying the coffee tray, my face a perfect blank mask of the devoted wife. They both stared at me, Robert with a cold, calculating gaze, Julian with dismissive certainty. "Cream?" I asked Robert. He ignored me, turning back to his son. "Find the leak and fix it, or we are all going down." They worked until 2 a.m., spreading documents across the study floor like they were trying to read the future in the tea leaves. I could hear Julian's office printer running non-stop, the shredder whining and hushed, frantic calls to lawyers who charged thousands an hour to be woken up at midnight. By 3 a.m., Julian had passed out in his chair, surrounded by the ruins of his collapsing empire. His head was resting on a stack of contracts, a thin line of drool pooling on papers worth millions. The great financial titan reduced to a drunk, exhausted man who'd built his kingdom on underestimating the women around him. I walked through the penthouse one last time, not with sadness, but with the detached efficiency of a person who was already gone. My clothes remained in the closet. Let him try to explain to people why his wife had left with nothing. The jewelry stayed in its velvet boxes, blood diamonds and gold chains that had never really felt like mine. In my purse, I had my laptop, my real ID, and the login information for Aura Strategic Ventures, which now held exactly 50% of our liquid marital assets, all legally transferred over the past few weeks. The keys went back on the granite counter where it all began. House key, car key, safe key, all in a neat, defiant line. Next to them, I left a single note on my personal stationery, the expensive cream-colored paper he'd bought me to complete the image. It said only 2 words: "Check your accounts." The doorman didn't bat an eye as Mrs. Croft left the building at 3 a.m. with nothing but her handbag. In his world, the rich did whatever they wanted. The crisp November air felt like a baptism as I stepped onto the empty street. 23 floors above me, Julian was sleeping, completely unaware that his wife had just launched the opening salvo in a war he didn't even know he was fighting. In 6 hours, he would wake up to find his bank accounts cut in half, his partners gone, and the FBI closing in. The Uber driver asked me where I was going, and for the first time in 5 years, I gave him an address that was truly my own. The Uber dropped me off at the Warwick just as the first rays of sun began to gild the Manhattan skyline. I paid in cash, walked through the lobby with my head held high, and went up to my room on the 12th floor. From my window, I had a perfect unobstructed view of our building, Julian's building now. At 6:47 a.m., I ordered room service. Poached eggs, fresh berries, and coffee strong enough to raise the dead. The sheer normalcy of it all felt like a dream. At 6:52, I opened my laptop and pulled up our joint banking portal, knowing the automated alerts would hit Julian's phone the second the banks officially opened for business at 7 a.m. At 7 a.m. on the dot, I hit refresh. The balances showed the automatic transfers Clara had filed weeks ago, all triggered by my official change of address. $18 million reallocated according to New York State's community property laws. 50% of everything, just as the prenuptial agreement he'd forced on me had stipulated. The same prenup he thought was his shield was actually my sword. My phone, lying face up on the table, lit up at 7:03 a.m. Julian's picture appeared, a photo from our wedding day where he looked so smug, so invincible. I let it go to voicemail. By 7:15, he had called 9 more times. I turned on my recorder, playing each new message out loud to the empty room. Message 1. Eliza, what is going on? The bank just called me. There's been some kind of massive error with our accounts. Message 4. This isn't funny anymore. Call me. We have to sort this out before the markets open. Message 11. What did you do? What did you do? Message 19. Please. Whatever point you think you're making, you've made it. We can fix this. You have no idea the position you've put me in. Message 28. The margin calls are coming in. I can't meet them without those funds. You're destroying everything we built. Message 35. Eliza, please. They're freezing all our assets. The FBI is here. Oh God, just answer the phone. By noon, his voice had completely unraveled, from commanding to pleading to pure raw panic. The 47th call came in while I was finishing my second pot of coffee. This time, I recognized the number. It was his lawyer. Mrs. Croft, this is James Callahan. Your husband has asked me to contact you regarding the irregular transfers of marital funds. We need to... I hung up and blocked the number. Then I called Clara. They're in a full-blown panic, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Everything we did was by the book. Those were joint assets. You had full legal access, and we followed every regulation to the letter. He can sue, but it will take him months. And by then, he'd have much bigger problems. That evening, I was eating dinner in my room, a perfectly cooked salmon that I could actually taste, when a news alert flashed on my phone. I flipped on the television. The footage was breathtaking in its brutality. Robert Croft, the titan who had built a financial empire on the ruins of other people's lives, was being led out of his Hamptons mansion in handcuffs. His hair was a mess, his usual armor of a bespoke suit replaced by a rumpled dress shirt. FBI agents were carrying box after box of evidence past the cameras, each one filled with the fruits of Eleanor's 40 years of silent rebellion. Federal authorities have arrested hedge fund mogul Robert Croft this morning, the reporter intoned, following a multi-year investigation into insider trading, wire fraud, and tax evasion. Sources say multiple whistleblowers came forward with crucial evidence, including detailed records spanning 4 decades. My phone buzzed. A text from Eleanor. It was just a single champagne bottle emoji. Eleanor, who had served these men for a lifetime while quietly documenting their downfall, had finally seen justice served. 3 weeks went by in a strange, quiet calm. I met with FBI agents, gave my testimony, and watched from my hotel room as the Croft empire disintegrated in real time. Leo fled to a country with no extradition treaty. Another partner pled guilty immediately, hoping for a deal. The rest turned on each other, a mad scramble to sell out their friends for a lighter sentence. Then, one Thursday evening, Julian found me. I was sitting at the bar of the Four Seasons, sipping champagne I had bought with my own money I had earned from trades he thought were just a cute hobby. He looked like a ghost in an expensive suit. He was unshaven with dark, hollow eyes, and his designer jacket was so wrinkled it looked like he'd been sleeping in it. "You ruined everything," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. He was standing too close, and I could smell the whiskey on his breath at 6 p.m. I swiveled on my bar stool to face him, meeting his bloodshot gaze. "Number." I revealed everything. "There's a difference. We had a life. You had a life," I cut him off. "I had a part in your play." I took a slow sip of my champagne. "You said I wouldn't last a week without you. It's been 21 days, Julian, and you're the one who looks like he's about to go under." He lunged for my arm, but his fingers closed on empty air as I pulled back. "You have no idea what you've done. My father is looking at 20 years. The fund is gone. Everything is gone. Everything is exactly as you built it," I replied calmly. "A house of cards." I just stopped holding my breath. His face twisted with rage. He raised his voice and heads turned at the bar. "You stupid little..." "Sir." The bartender, a woman around Eleanor's age, stepped forward. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "Do you have any idea who I am?" Julian spat. "Someone who's disturbing my other guests," she replied, her voice even. Security arrived in less than a minute. 2 large men efficiently escorted us shouting, threatening Julian out of the bar. The bartender returned, polished a clean glass, and placed a fresh flute of champagne in front of me. "This one's on the house," she said. That looked like it was a long time coming. 2 days later, Sophie and I were called to testify on the same day. She looked stronger, more confident than I had ever seen her. We sat in the sterile courthouse hallway, not speaking, but in a state of perfect understanding. Eleanor's testimony was last. It took 3 days. She brought receipts for everything, every bribe, every threat, every life they had ruined. She spoke about Elena's accident, Caroline's commitment, Jennifer's bankruptcy. She presented 4 decades of evidence with the calm precision of a woman who had been waiting for this moment her entire life. "Why did you keep all these records?" the prosecutor asked. Eleanor adjusted her glasses and looked directly at Robert, who was sitting at the defendant's table. "Because I knew that one day someone would be brave enough to use them. Someone like Miss Monroe." The prosecutor looked confused. "You mean Mrs. Croft?" "No," Eleanor said, her voice firm. "I mean Miss Monroe." She took her name back. She took everything back. That night, Clara called me. The DA says Eleanor's evidence alone guarantees convictions across the board. Robert will die in prison. Julian's looking at a minimum of 15 years. I stood at my window, looking out at the city lights. All those towers would still be standing long after the name Croft had turned to dust. The skyscrapers looked smaller from Clara's office window, or maybe I was just seeing them from a new perspective. She slid the final divorce decree across her desk. The paper was light, but it carried the weight of a new life. "Judge's ruling came down this morning," she said, unable to hide a grin. "You get the house, 60% of all remaining liquid assets, and your separate property is completely untouched." The courtroom had been a circus 3 days prior. Julian sat next to his lawyer wearing the same suit from our wedding, but it hung on him now. His lawyer had tried one last desperate move. "Your Honor, Mrs. Croft enjoyed the fruits of these alleged crimes. She lived a life of luxury." Clara had stood up, cool as a cucumber. "Your Honor, I'd like to play a selection from Mr. Croft's personal voice recorder, dated 14 months ago." Julian's voice, clear and condescending, filled the courtroom. "She wouldn't understand a balance sheet if I drew it for her in crayon. That's the beauty of it. She's too stupid to ask the right questions." The judge, a woman who looked like she'd heard it all, stared directly at Julian. "Mr. Croft, it seems you gravely misjudged your wife's intelligence. Perhaps if you'd spent less time being so sure of her stupidity, you might have been more careful with your criminal activities. Now, holding the decree, I signed my name, Eliza Monroe, on every line. Each stroke of the pen felt like reclaiming a part of myself. The whistleblower reward should clear by next month," Clara added. Between your share and Eleanor's, you'll have more than enough to get started." Eleanor was waiting for me in the lobby, wearing a sharp new pantsuit. We walked 2 blocks to the building where Croft Capital had once occupied the top 3 floors. The lobby directory now had a blank space where their name used to be. "3rd floor," Eleanor said, pressing the button. "The landlord gave us a discount. Apparently, a foundation for survivors of financial abuse is better for their image than an empty office." The space was modest, just 4 rooms that used to be a law firm. But the windows faced east, and there was something deeply satisfying about building our new future right on top of Julian's ruins. "The Phoenix Foundation," Eleanor read from the temporary sign we'd hung on the door, "rising from the ashes." Our first client arrived that afternoon, the wife of a biotech executive who'd been falsifying clinical trial results. She was clutching a folder of documents like it was a life raft. "My husband says I'm being paranoid," she whispered, her eyes darting between me and Eleanor. "He says I couldn't possibly understand the science." Eleanor leaned forward, her 40 years of experience condensed into a look of absolute resolve. "Every document tells a story," she said. "We're going to help you write a different ending." 2 weeks before Christmas, my mother called. "I'm coming to visit," she announced, not a question. I had moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet part of Brooklyn. It was a fraction of the size of the penthouse, but it was filled with plants and light. The kitchen was small, but I was teaching myself how to actually cook in it. My mom arrived with 1 small suitcase and 1,000 unspoken questions. I picked her up myself in my used, practical sedan. "You look different," she said, studying my face in the rearview mirror. "Lighter." That week, we didn't talk about Julian or the trial or the money. We talked about the foundation, about Eleanor's dry wit, about the women who came through our doors carrying their secrets like heavy stones. I cooked Christmas dinner. The turkey was a little overdone, but the stuffing was perfect. My mom just watched me move around my own kitchen, so at ease in a way I never was in that cold marble penthouse. "You're happy," she said, a statement of fact. "I'm free," I replied, which I'm learning might be the same thing. She stayed for another week. On her last night, she gave me a hug, the kind she used to give me when I was a little girl before I learned how to perform happiness instead of just feeling it. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "Not for surviving him, for becoming you." 6 months had passed. Spring was blooming in Brooklyn. I stood in the doorway of the house, my house now, for the last time, just to sign the final sale papers. The rooms felt vast and empty. My phone rang. It was Eleanor, her voice buzzing with an energy that 40 years of servitude had never allowed. "We've got a new one," she said, "a senator's wife. She's been tracking his campaign finance violations for 2 years." I looked at the keys in my hand. They were heavy, but not with the weight of possessions. They were weighted with purpose. Through the window, I saw Chloe Bennett walking down the street, holding hands with a young man her own age. Not Julian, who was serving 3 to 5 years, and not any other Croft, just a normal guy. "Ready for the next one?" Eleanor asked. I thought about the 17 women who had already come to us, 4 of whom were now financially independent and free. The other 13 were still building their cases, gathering their courage. I was born ready, I told Eleanor, closing the door on the empty house for good. I just didn't know it until someone told me I was nothing. The lock clicked shut. I walked to my car and tossed the keys to the real estate agent who would sell this monument to Julian's ego. The proceeds would fund the Phoenix Foundation for another 2 years. As I drove back to Brooklyn, back to my real life, I thought about Elena, Caroline, and Jennifer, the ghosts of wives past. They had been erased, but their stories, saved by Eleanor, had in turn saved me. Now we were saving others, one secret at a time, building a bridge out of the ashes of an empire we had burned to the ground. My phone buzzed. A text from Sophie. "Coffee tomorrow. I've got someone you need to meet. She needs our help." I smiled as I merged into traffic, heading home. My real home. A place where I had finally set down the keys and walked into this life, this freedom that looked exactly like I had always hoped it would. Unspectacular, undramatic, and completely, utterly mine. If this story of calculated revenge had you cheering for Eliza, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when she laid out those keys on the granite counter and walked away without looking back. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more thrilling stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. End of story.